20. Signs your avoidant ex misses you. You ever wonder if that avoidant ex, the one who seems so distant, so emotionally unavailable, actually misses you? Let me tell you something. Human psychology is predictable. Even avoidants with their walls and defense mechanisms are not immune to loss. See, avoidants don't process emotions like everyone else. They don't chase, they don't cry out loud. Instead, they withdraw, they detach. But that doesn't mean they don't feel the loss. It just shows up differently. Avoidants process emotions differently from others. While someone with an anxious attachment style might reach out immediately, confessing their feelings and seeking comfort, an avoidant reacts in the opposite way. They suppress, withdraw, and intellectualize their emotions instead of expressing them openly. But just because they don't say, "I miss you" outright, doesn't mean they don't feel it. They leave subtle clues, indirect signals that when pieced together reveal what they won't verbalize. One of the most telling signs that an avoidant ex misses you is their silent presence in your digital world. They might not text or call, but they keep checking your social media. If you notice that they always seem to view your Instagram stories, react to your posts, or even accidentally like an old photo, this isn't just random behavior. It's a controlled way of staying connected while keeping their emotional guard up. Avoidants don't like feeling exposed or vulnerable, so their way of staying in your orbit is through passive observation rather than direct communication. Another clue is their interaction with mutual friends. They might casually ask about you, not in a dramatic or desperate way, but in a passing comment like, "How's your name doing?" It seems innocent, but for an avoidant, even asking is a big step. They don't want to admit they care, yet they seek information to gauge where you're at emotionally. If they learn you're moving on, dating someone new, or thriving without them, this might trigger their fear of loss. Avoidants also tend to resurface in indirect ways, often under the guise of coincidence. If they show up at places they know you frequent, it's rarely accidental. An avoidant who misses you won't blatantly ask to see you, but will position themselves in situations where they might run into you naturally. It allows them to reconnect without feeling like they're chasing. This controlled re-entry into your life lets them test the waters and see if you're still open to them, all without directly confronting their emotions. Another common behavior is what's known as breadcrumbing, sending out small, low-risk signals to gauge your response. They might text you randomly with something like, "Hey, do you remember the name of that restaurant we went to?" Or "I just heard a song that reminded me of you." These aren't just casual messages. They're strategic. They give them a way to engage with you while keeping the interaction safe. If you respond warmly, it reassures them. If you ignore them, they can retreat without feeling too exposed. Avoidants also tend to keep certain belongings from their past relationships. If you still have items at their place, they might not rush to return them. Keeping your things allows them to hold onto a tangible piece of the connection without having to admit they're struggling with the breakup. This ties into the way avoidants process emotions. They delay dealing with their feelings. Unlike someone who immediately clears out all reminders of an ex, an avoidant might let things sit for months, pretending it's no big deal, when in reality it's a quiet acknowledgement that they're not ready to fully let go. Jealousy is another clear but subtle indicator. An avoidant won't openly express jealousy, but their behavior will shift when they see you moving on. They might start posting more on social media, subtly competing for attention. Maybe they suddenly start working out, changing their appearance, or making big life improvements, changes that conveniently align with the knowledge that you might be seeing someone new. This isn't just about self-growth. It's often their subconscious way of signaling that they're still relevant, still desirable, and perhaps even making you rethink the breakup. One of the most fascinating aspects of an avoidant missing you is how they suddenly become more emotionally introspective. If they start sharing deep reflections or hint at personal growth, it's often because they've been processing the loss in their own way. Avoidants don't talk about their emotions in real time, but when they do, it's a delayed reaction. If your ex, who once avoided serious conversations, suddenly seems open to them, it's a sign that they've been sitting with their emotions longer than you realize. When an avoidant ex misses you, they won't make it obvious. Instead of reaching out directly or admitting their feelings, they find ways to stay in your orbit without putting themselves in a vulnerable position. One of the biggest ways they do this is through indirect communication, primarily through social media and mutual friends. They might not send you a heartfelt message or ask to meet up, but they will watch, listen, and gather information about your life in ways that require little emotional risk on their part. Social media is one of the most common tools an avoidant ex will use to check in on you without actually talking to you. If you notice that they are consistently watching your Instagram stories, liking your posts, or even following new people in your circle, these are not coincidence. Avoidants prefer indirect engagement because it allows them to stay connected while maintaining control over their emotions. If they didn't care, they would unfollow, mute, or completely disengage. But instead, they linger in the background, subtly making their It's known. Another common behavior is the accidental engagement, like liking an old post and quickly unliking it. This happens when they're scrolling through your profile, reminiscing about the past, and unintentionally leave a trace of their presence. Even if they remove the like, it signals that they've been thinking about you and revisiting old memories. Avoidants are highly self-controlled, so if this happens, it's often a crack in their emotional armor, revealing that they still have unresolved feelings. Mutual friends also become a channel for them to check in on you. If they casually ask about you, even in a nonchalant way, it's a strong sign that they're still emotionally invested. They may frame it as simple curiosity, but avoidants don't typically go out of their way to inquire about an ex unless there is a lingering attachment. In some cases, they may even tell mutual friends misleading things like, I hope they're doing well, or I don't really think about the relationship much anymore. But if they weren't thinking about you, they wouldn't feel the need to say anything at all. Sometimes an avoidant ex won't ask directly, but will instead react emotionally to hearing about your life. If a mutual friend tells them you're dating someone new and the response is dismissive, sarcastic, or even irritated, that's a key indicator that they still care. Avoidants pride themselves on appearing unbothered, so if there's even a hint of jealousy or frustration in their reaction, it's likely because the news triggered emotions they don't want to acknowledge. Another indirect way they stay connected is by leaving subtle breadcrumbs, small, low-risk attempts to gauge whether you're still open to interacting with them. This could be a random text that has no real purpose, like, hey, do you still have that book I lent you? Or I just saw something that reminded me of you. These messages are rarely about what they claim to be. Instead, they are testing the waters. If you respond, it gives them the reassurance that the door isn't completely closed. If you don't, they can retreat without feeling too exposed. In some cases, they may even find excuses to be in places where they know you'll be. This isn't a direct move, but if they suddenly start showing up at events, cafes, or gym sessions that they never used to attend, it's often a sign that they're positioning themselves in your world again without having to explicitly ask for your presence. Since avoidants fear rejection, this strategy allows them to reconnect with minimal emotional risk. Even their online activity can reveal their lingering feelings. If they start posting cryptic messages, song lyrics, or quotes that seem to align with your past relationships, chances are they're thinking about you. They may also start posting about their personal growth, hitting the gym, picking up new hobbies, or making significant life changes. While self-improvement is always good, when it happens right after a breakup and is visible to you, it's often a way of signaling that they're evolving and possibly hoping you'll notice. At the end of the day, avoidants will rarely admit they miss you outright. Instead, they will keep the connection alive through subtle actions that allow them to feel close to you without risking emotional exposure. They rely on social media, mutual friends, and indirect communication to stay in your orbit, while maintaining their protective walls. If you notice these signs, it's because they are struggling with the breakup more than they would ever admit. One of the most telling signs that an avoidant ex misses you is when they start bringing up old inside jokes or shared memories. Avoidants don't typically dwell on the past in a sentimental way, at least not outwardly. They tend to suppress emotions and keep their distance after a breakup to avoid feeling vulnerable. So when they suddenly reference something from your time together, it's not random. It's a way for them to reconnect with you without directly admitting that they miss you. Inside jokes are powerful because they create a sense of intimacy between two people. When your ex brings up an old joke, it's their way of testing whether that connection still exists. They might say something like, remember that ridiculous road trip playlist we made? Or I just saw someone who looked exactly like that waiter who kept messing up our order. These comments seem casual, but they serve a deeper purpose. They remind both of you of the bond you once had, and more importantly, they allow your ex to gauge your reaction. If you laugh or engage, they feel reassured that the connection isn't completely broken. If you ignore it, they retreat, pretending it didn't mean anything. For an avoidant, nostalgia can be confusing. On one hand, they crave independence and emotional distance. On the other, they aren't immune to missing someone who is deeply important to them. Unlike an anxious attachment style where a person might openly express their longing, an avoidant processes these feelings internally. Instead of saying, I miss you, they bring up shared moments as a way to keep you emotionally engaged without making themselves vulnerable. This behavior often appears in text messages or casual conversations, but it can also show up in their social media activity. If your ex starts posting about places you went together, songs you both loved, or activities that were significant in your relationship, it's not by accident. They might share a photo of a place you used to frequent or post a playlist with songs that hold meaning for both of you. These are subtle breadcrumbs designed to catch your attention without requiring them to explicitly reach out. Another layer to this is when they recall moments that highlight the emotional depth of your relationship. Avoidants often struggle with deep emotional intimacy in the present, but they are more comfortable reflecting on it from a distance. So when they bring up meaningful conversations, moments of vulnerability, or times when they felt especially close to you, it's a sign that they're processing the relationship more deeply than they let on. This is particularly evident when an avoidant ex brings up things you taught them or ways you influenced their life. If they mention that they finally watched a show you recommended, tried a restaurant you loved, or started practicing a habit you introduced them to, it means they are still mentally and emotionally connected to you. Even if they frame it as a casual comment, the fact that they are thinking about your influence on their life says a lot. You may also notice that they bring up these memories in group settings, not just one-on-one. This allows them to reference the past without feeling like they're making themselves too vulnerable. For example, if you're with mutual friends and they suddenly tell a funny story about something you two did together, it's a way of bringing you into the conversation without directly addressing you. It's also a low-risk way for them to see how you react. If you laugh and engage, it reassures them. If you seemed indifferent, they can brush it off as just reminiscing. A key thing to understand about avoidance is that they rarely make direct emotional statements. Instead, they communicate through subtext. If your ex is constantly revisiting shared experiences, it's because those memories still hold weight for them. They are trying to bridge the emotional gap in a way that feels safe for them by testing the waters, seeing how you respond, and keeping the connection alive without having to admit they're struggling with the separation. When an avoidant ex misses you, they won't tell you directly. Instead, they show it in subtle ways, one of the biggest being mirroring your behavior. This means they start reflecting aspects of your life, interests, and even emotions without realizing it. It's an unconscious way of maintaining a connection while still keeping their emotional guard up. Mirroring happens in relationships naturally. It's a psychological phenomenon where people imitate the behavior, speech, or attitudes of those they feel connected to. Even after a breakup, if your avoidant ex still has lingering feelings, they may start to adopt aspects of your life to feel closer to you. It's not necessarily a deliberate move. It's something they do subconsciously as they process the loss and try to keep that emotional bond alive in a way that feels safe for them. One of the first places you might notice mirroring is on social media. If you post about starting a new hobby, suddenly they're doing the same thing. If you share a trip you took, they might post about traveling soon too. Maybe you've been sharing motivational quotes or fitness updates, and now they're doing something similar. This isn't just about them making life changes. It's about them still feeling connected to you and aligning their actions with yours without directly reaching out. This kind of mirroring can also show up in their appearance or personal habits. If you've made a significant change, like switching up your style, working out more, or adopting a new lifestyle, your avoidant ex might start doing something similar. It's almost as if they're trying to keep pace with you. Avoidants often struggle with expressing emotions, so instead of saying, "I miss you," they might unconsciously adjust their habits to match yours as if to stay in sync even from a distance. Another way mirroring happens is in the way they communicate. If you've become more distant and withdrawn, you may notice they start acting even more distant, as if reflecting your energy. But if you start engaging in subtle ways, perhaps responding to a mutual friend's post or posting a nostalgic song, they might begin doing the same. This back and forth dynamic is common because avoidants fear being too exposed emotionally, so they take cues from your behavior to determine what's safe. Mirroring can also appear in their interests and lifestyle choices. If you used to go to a particular coffee shop or gym together and suddenly they start frequenting that place again, it's a sign they are still attached to those shared routines. Maybe they start listening to music you introduced them to, or they bring up books or movies you recommended. These small actions indicate that even though they may not openly express their feelings, they are still influenced by your presence in their life. Another common sign of mirroring is when they start using phrases, jokes, or inside references that were unique to your relationship. If you notice them repeating words or expressions they picked up from you, it's because those little habits stuck with them. Even if they're using them in a different context, the fact that they're still part of their vocabulary suggests that you left a lasting impression. Sometimes mirroring even happens in emotional responses. If you seem like you're moving on and doing well, they might suddenly start showing signs of happiness or success as well. But if they sense that you're struggling or feeling nostalgic, they might begin posting more emotional or introspective content too. This kind of emotional mirroring is a way for them to maintain a connection without having to admit that they are still affected by the breakup. Avoidance may not be the type to chase after an ex, but they do have ways of keeping a connection alive. Mirroring is one of the clearest signs that they still feel emotionally tied to you, even if they don't acknowledge it directly. They take cues from your actions, habits, and energy to navigate their own emotions, trying to stay close to you in ways that feel safe for them. Even if they seem distant on the surface, their subconscious behaviors often reveal what they won't say out loud. An avoidant X will rarely express their emotions outright, but one of the most telling signs that they miss you is when they suddenly show signs of jealousy. Unlike someone with an anxious attachment style, who might openly express their discomfort when they see an X moving on, an avoidant will try to play it cool. They won't say, "I don't like seeing you with someone else," but their behavior will shift in ways that subtly reveal their feelings. Jealousy and avoidance often manifest in indirect ways. One of the clearest signs is when they start paying more attention to your social media activity, especially when you interact with other people. If they start watching your stories more frequently, liking posts they usually wouldn't, or even engaging with your content in a way that seems out of the ordinary, they are likely keeping tabs on you. An avoidant might not comment or message you directly, but their increased online presence is a sign that they're monitoring what's happening in your life. This becomes even more obvious if you post about spending time with someone new. If you share pictures from a date, tag a new person in a post, or simply appear to be enjoying yourself without them, an avoidant X may respond in ways that suggest jealousy, even if they don't confront you about it. They might suddenly start posting more, showing off their own outings, or making subtle efforts to appear as though they're thriving without you. This is their way of counterbalancing the emotional discomfort of seeing you move on. Another way an avoidant X displays jealousy is through indirect questioning. They won't ask you directly if you're seeing someone else, but they might find ways to gather information through mutual friends. They may casually ask, "Oh, I saw your name was out last night. Do you know who they were with?" Or make comments like, "Looks like they're having fun." These subtle inquiries indicate that they're thinking about you more than they're willing to admit. Avoidants are also known for their sudden reappearances when they sense that you're moving on. If they've been silent for weeks or months, but suddenly send a random message after you've been posting about your social life, it's likely not a coincidence. They may ask about something unrelated, such as an old inside joke, or shared experience, but their timing suggests that they've been triggered by the possibility of losing you for good. Since avoidants struggle with vulnerability, they don't always recognize their own jealousy in the moment, but their actions often give them away. Another common response is for them to become competitive. If they suspect you're seeing someone new, they may start showing off aspects of their own life, whether it's a new workout routine, an exciting project, or even hints that they might be dating someone else. This isn't always about genuinely moving on. Often it's an emotional defense mechanism designed to protect their ego. They want to appear as if they're unaffected, even though their actions are being driven by an emotional reaction to the thought of losing you. You might also notice that they start bringing up your relationship in conversations, either directly or indirectly. If they make comments about how different they are now, how much they've grown, or how they've been reflecting on the past, it's often a way to make you see them in a new light. Avoidants don't like to chase, but they do want to maintain control over how they're perceived. If they feel like you're slipping away, they may try to subtly remind you of what you once had. Perhaps one of the most revealing signs of jealousy is when they start interacting more with people in your social circle. If they suddenly reconnect with mutual friends, like posts from people they never engaged with before, or even start following someone you're close to, it's a way of keeping themselves connected to your world. This is a passive but effective way for them to stay informed about your life without having to directly ask you. At their core, avoidants fear vulnerability, and jealousy exposes them in a way they are uncomfortable with. Instead of admitting their emotions, they try to maintain their independence and self-sufficiency, but their actions, whether it's suddenly paying attention to your life, competing for attention, or subtly checking in through mutual friends, reveal that they haven't fully detached. Even if they seem emotionally distant on the surface, their jealous reactions suggest that a part of them still cares, whether they admit it or not. When an avoidant X misses you, they won't come right out and say it. Instead, they will find subtle ways to test whether you're still emotionally available to them. This often takes the form of small, seemingly insignificant check-ins, random texts, social media interactions, or casual encounters that feel unplanned, but are actually intentional. These tests allow them to gauge your reaction without putting themselves in a vulnerable position. One of the most common ways they test the waters is through what seems like a meaningless text message. They might send something like, "Hey, do you still have that book I lent you?" Or, "I just heard a song that reminded me of you." These messages rarely have any real purpose. The book isn't important. The song isn't the point. What they're really doing is seeing if you'll engage with them. If you respond positively, it reassures them that you're still emotionally accessible. If you don't reply, they retreat, telling themselves they were just being casual. Another tactic is to bring up inside jokes or shared memories. They might say, "Remember that ridiculous road trip we took?" Or, "I saw someone today who looked Just like that waiter who kept messing up our order. These messages are never random. Avoidants don't reminisce openly unless they're trying to reconnect. By mentioning something that holds sentimental value, they're subtly checking to see if you still feel a sense of connection to them. If you laugh or engage, it signals that there's still emotional warmth between you. Social media is another major way avoidants test the waters. If they start watching your stories more frequently, liking your posts, or even commenting after a long period of silence, it's their way of signaling interest. They may not reach out directly, but they want you to notice their presence. In some cases, they'll go even further, posting cryptic messages, song lyrics, or nostalgic references that seem to align with your past relationship. These are passive ways of communicating their feelings without having to admit them outright. Another clear sign that they're testing the waters is when they ask mutual friends about you. They casually bring up your name, ask how you're doing, or even make a point to mention that they hope you're doing well. It's often a way of gathering information without reaching out directly. Sometimes they'll even tell mutual friends misleading things like, "I'm totally over it," just to gauge how that information might get back to you. If they sense that you still care, they may feel more comfortable making a move. Sometimes an avoidant ex will go a step further and create opportunities to run into you accidentally. They might start showing up at places where they know you'll be, whether it's a gym, coffee shop, or event. These encounters feel coincidental, but they're often planned. Avoidants fear rejection, so instead of directly asking to see you, they position themselves in a way that allows a natural interaction to take place. If you respond warmly, it reassures them. If you seem indifferent, they can act as if it was never intentional. In some cases, they'll even use indirect methods to test your availability, such as posting about their own life changes, personal growth, or new experiences. This isn't just about self-improvement, it's a strategic move to see if you react. If they post about working out, taking on a new hobby, or having fun with friends, they're often hoping you'll notice and engage. If you do, it signals that you're still paying attention, which gives them an emotional boost. At their core, avoidants struggle with vulnerability, and testing the waters is their way of protecting themselves while still seeking a connection. They want to know that you haven't completely moved on, but they don't want to risk outright rejection. So instead, they rely on small, low-risk interactions to gauge your response. If you recognize these subtle tests, it's because they're still emotionally invested, even if they won't say it outright. Their actions reveal what their words do not. They miss you, and they're trying to see if there's still a place for them in your life. To wrap up, recognizing the signs that an avoidant ex misses you can be tricky, because they rarely express their feelings directly. However, by paying attention to subtle behaviors, such as indirect communication through social media, the use of nostalgia, mirroring your actions, showing signs of jealousy, and testing the waters with small check-ins, you and begin to understand their emotional state. These signs reveal that even though they may not openly acknowledge it, they are still emotionally connected to you. Avoidants fear vulnerability and rejection, so their way of reconnecting is often indirect and requires careful observation. If you notice these signs, it's important to remember that avoidants may not be ready to confront their emotions fully, but that doesn't mean they don't miss you. They may need time to process their feelings, and while they might not seek direct contact, their actions often speak louder than words. It's crucial to approach these situations with understanding and compassion for their fears and vulnerabilities. Thank you for taking the time to read and reflect on this discussion. It's not always easy to navigate relationships, especially when dealing with someone who has an avoidant attachment style. But by recognizing these subtle cues, you can better understand where your ex stands emotionally. Whether or not you choose to engage with them, understanding their behavior allows you to move forward with more clarity and confidence. I hope these insights have given you a deeper understanding of the dynamics at play, and I wish you all the best in navigating your own journey of healing and personal growth. Thank you. An avoidant ex, when they miss you, often tests the waters through small, seemingly insignificant actions that give them a way to gauge your emotional availability without putting themselves at risk. This behavior can be seen as indirect communication, where they don't openly ask for attention or express their feelings, but rather rely on subtle ways to check if you still have space for them in your life. These tests are a defense mechanism, a way for them to maintain control over their emotions while still holding on to the possibility of reestablishing a connection. One of the most common ways avoidants test the waters is through random or unexpected text messages. These are typically not about anything significant, but serve as a low-risk way for them to reach out. For example, they might message you saying, "Hey, do you still have that book I lent you?" Or, "I was thinking about that movie we watched." At face value, these messages might seem casual and innocent. However, they're essentially a way of checking if you're still open to communication. The topic is usually trivial, but the real purpose behind these messages is to see if you'll respond in a way that suggests you still care or are emotionally available to them. Sometimes these check-ins aren't even in the form of a direct text, but a comment on something you've posted or shared. If your ex likes or comments on your social media posts after a period of silence, it's a subtle indication that they are still monitoring your life and are curious about your current emotional state. For them, engaging in this indirect way gives them some control. If you respond positively, it's like a signal that things might still be okay between you. If you ignore them or don't engage, they can retreat without the fear of exposing themselves to vulnerability. Another way an avoidant ex tests the waters is by bringing up shared memories or inside jokes. If they suddenly reference something you both enjoyed or a funny moment from your time together, it's their way of reconnecting emotionally. The fact that they are bringing up a memory shows they are still thinking about you, but by doing so in a casual manner, they avoid the risk of openly admitting their feelings. By bringing up a shared joke or experience, they are also evaluating how you feel about the relationship. If you respond positively, it confirms to them that there might still be a bond. If you brush it off or don't engage, it serves as a kind of protection for them. They can tell themselves that it was just a passing thought, and they won't have to risk further emotional investment. Avoidants also tend to test the waters through their social circle. They may subtly ask mutual friends about you or try to gather information from those who still interact with you. For example, they might ask things like, "How's your name?" or "I saw they were out last weekend. Who were they with?" These indirect questions are a way for them to check in without risking a direct conversation with you. If you're still in the conversation, it gives them the reassurance they need that things aren't completely closed off. Lastly, avoidants may try to arrange accidental encounters. They might show up at places they know you frequent, such as a cafe, gym, or even a mutual friends gathering. These encounters are not random. They are carefully planned attempts to reconnect without having to make the first move. If the meeting goes well, it gives them a sense of emotional closeness. If it doesn't, they can always justify it by saying it was an accident or coincidence, which protects them from vulnerability. In the end, when an avoidant ex tests the waters, they are trying to measure how safe it is for them to emotionally re-engage. Instead of expressing their feelings directly, they use small, indirect methods to check if you're still emotionally available without putting themselves in a situation where they might face rejection. If you recognize these signs, it's clear that even if they don't show it outright, they miss you and are trying to figure out if it's possible to rekindle some form of connection. To wrap up, recognizing the signs that an avoidant ex misses you can be tricky because they rarely express their feelings directly. However, by paying attention to subtle behaviors, such as indirect communication through social media, the use of nostalgia, mirroring your actions, showing signs of jealousy, and testing the waters with small check-ins, you can begin to understand their emotional state. These signs reveal that even though they may not openly acknowledge it, they are still emotionally connected to you. Avoidants fear vulnerability and rejection, so their way of reconnecting is often indirect and requires careful observation. If you notice these signs, it's important to remember that avoidants may not be ready to confront their emotions fully, but that doesn't mean they don't miss you. They may need time to process their feelings, and while they might not seek direct contact, their actions often speak louder than words. It's crucial to approach these situations with understanding and compassion for their fears and vulnerabilities. Thank you for taking the time to read and reflect on this discussion. It's not always easy to navigate relationships, especially when dealing with someone who has an avoidant attachment style. But by recognizing these subtle cues, you can better understand where your ex stands emotionally and whether or not you choose to engage with them. Understanding their behavior allows you to move forward with more clarity and confidence. I hope these insights have given you a deeper understanding of the dynamics at play, and I wish you all the best in navigating your own journey of healing and personal growth. Thank you.